Brendan Batchelor joining us here now from Sportsnet 650. You hear him as the radio voice of the Vancouver Canucks. Batch,
He's got his headset on.
Yeah, he's ready to go. He's not going to take that off for another 6 hours.
Yeah, it's a professional setup. Absolutely. Got the headset on, ready to roll. How's it going, guys?
I'm doing good. I'm just glad you don't have a green screen behind you because you pulled out a green energy drink here, and they can't. I don't know what the heck my producer Alex has got me in a bind here. But Batch, good to get you on the show today, man. Canucks get back home tonight against the Washington Capitals. But hey, quickly, we were just touching on it there a little bit with Podkolzin. What do you think Podkolzin and Rathbone can gain from this AHL stint that we're going to see up the upcoming at least few days, maybe weeks? We'll see what happens with these guys. What can those two players gain from a trip down to Abbotsford?
Yeah, well, I think it's a different conversation for each player. So let's start with Rathbone, who just hasn't been playing. He's got to play games, right? Like Podkolzin, I know had been scratched, obviously had the facial injury after the fight in Boston. So hadn't as much lately, but Rathbone's played, 6 games for the Canucks this year? So he was a guy that they needed to just get into games again. And I've sort of been thinking it for a number of weeks now that they needed to send him down. And I'm a little surprised they took this long to get him down there to get some games in. But that's going to be important for him as a guy that doesn't have a ton of pro experience over the last few years, in large part because of the pandemic and the injuries he faced last year too. So just get him playing games, get him feeling confident. For Podkolzin, I think it's probably a confidence thing too. In terms of whether it's like a quick turnaround and a guy gets recalled, I think that's more likely to happen for Podkolzin than it is for Rathbone. But that said, injury issues can change things, at any time. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Canucks navigate getting some of these forwards back, because Studnicka was back at the morning skate today. Pearson, you have to imagine, can't be too far off a return to the lineup. So they are going to have some roster decisions here. And at the end of the day, Podkolzin hasn't been in the lineup. The team has and he's one of those guys that doesn't need waivers to go down to Abbotsford. So for a lot of reasons, it makes sense, but hopefully he can regain some confidence after a bit of a slow start to the year offensively to go down there and put up some numbers and start feeling good about his game again.
Batch, Spencer Martin gets to start tonight. Just your overall thoughts on the goaltending situation right now. Do we have a controversy? I was going back and forth with Rob, Daily Hive Rob, before the show. He thinks there's a controversy. I don't call it a controversy, but your thoughts on the goaltending situation right now?
If it's a controversy, it's a mini controversy, because I don't think anybody's going to debate, the future of the crease in the long term for this organization. But in the short term, I think it's clear that Bruce Boudreau feels that Spencer Martin gives him the best chance to win right now in this moment. And this is a team that needs wins and a head coach that needs wins in the final year of his contract now. So that's sort of how I analyze this is, this is Boudreau saying, I trust Spencer Martin. He's done everything that I've asked of him. He's won all but one game when he's gone into the crease since he arrived in Vancouver, at least in terms of regulation losses anyway. So Boudreau trusts him. He's going to go back to him. And, the way he did after the morning skate today was, just because Demko has a good game or a couple of good games doesn't mean they're going to give him 7 or 8 straight starts. They want to work him in slowly. So, he gets a game, they give him a game off. Maybe next time he has a good start, he gets 2 in a row, then 3 in a row, and kind of, build his confidence up that way, which to a certain extent makes sense. Although I'm kind of the mind that, your franchise goaltender, you probably want him to play his way through it a little bit. But, at the same time, some healthy competition probably isn't a bad thing for this organization. That Spencer Martin is taking some of those starts away from Thatcher Demko now, I'm sure is going to be a motivating factor for Demko to get him back in order here and retake control of the crease. So internal competition, we talk about it all the time. It's a huge talking point at training camp every year, but to have it in the crease. And after what we've seen over the last couple of years with Braden Holtby and Jarro Halak and backup goaltenders that weren't pushing Demko at all, it's a nice problem to have if you've got, a backup goaltender that isn't making much against the cap, that is coming in and, stealing starts from your starting goaltender, because in the long run, that means Demko's not going to play as much. And if you do find a way to battle back to any sort of playoff conversation, then Demko won't have played as much early in the year and might be rested if they need to rely on him down the stretch late in the season.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we saw what happened last year, how many games Demko had to get into. Once he finds his game, yeah, you're right. This is going to be kind of a lighter load, at least for the rest of the season. I'm curious to get your thoughts, and I could, we could hear it today in the media that we were doing. Some of the questions about the Vancouver Canucks turning the corner. I'm not going to ask you if you think they've turned the corner and turned the page on what the start of the season was, but what are you seeing, let's say, over these last 6 games where they've won 5 of the 6 games? Obviously that 3-game win streak on the road. What are you seeing that's different and maybe improved from what we saw earlier in the season with all the losses?
The biggest thing for me is they look tighter defensively. And, we're never going to sit here and talk about the Canucks as being an elite defensive team or a team that really locks games down. We know they've got flaws in the way their roster's built and the way their back end is built in particular. So, are they suddenly going to turn into a team that doesn't give up any goals or goes 5 straight games giving up 1 goal or fewer? No, that's not who the Vancouver Canucks are. Lucky for them, they've got one of the better offenses in the league, at least to start this year, although we could debate how sustainable that's going to be down the stretch. That has allowed them to win some games here, but things haven't looked quite as loose in the defensive zone. I think Ethan Bear has really come into his own and helped Slings in the top 4 on the right side. I like the fact that Kyle Burrows is back in the lineup and seems to be there consistently, even though he's the right shot playing on the left side. So, those are all things that are encouraging. And the fact that they've gotten some timely saves too, whether it be Demko. I think you look back at the game in Vegas on the road trip, and as much as the Canucks dominated that game, Vegas had 2 or 3 good scoring chances right at the start of the game, but they got the saves they needed. They were able to play their way through it. They got an early power play, they score, and then they were able to build off that and create momentum. So, it's never going to be perfect defensively, but I think it's looked better. And then they've had some timely saves at times they need them in games that allows them to get wins and get confidence. And then I couldn't have this conversation without talking about the Pedersen line with Mikheyev and Kuzmenko, who to me really feel like they've taken their game to another level in the last couple of weeks.
Couple of players you mentioned there, obviously on PP1. We're starting to see, like, I think the players have kind of even talked about this a little bit, seeing the power play evolve a little bit. Like, it felt like for a while there, it was just the Pedersen one timer. Then we saw like the downhill JT Miller shot be added. Then it really just felt like everything was about Horvat and the bumper. Now you're seeing Kuzmenko as the net front. You're seeing Besser in that spot. Like, it feels like the only thing they're missing right now is like Quinn Hughes having a deadly shot to have 5 different viable, efficient options to score goals. Are you seeing like an evolution with the power play, and like how different is it from this year to maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the execution or some of the things you're talking about, it's not a lot different, right? Like they've got the Horvat one timer from the bumper. They can either feed him from the half wall with Miller or the down low play with Kuzmenko or front. They've got the Pedersen shot. They've got the Miller shot downhill, which I agree we've seen more often this year, but it's also not the first time that Jellers tried to create offense from those situations. And these are just guys that have now played on the power play together for a number of years. So they look more confident. They understand, what's going to be available to them, where other guys on the ice are going to be. And it allows them to rip penalty kills apart where, if Miller's got the puck on the left wing wall, the penalty kill kind of has to decide, are they going to defend against his shot, or are they going to be worried about the fact that he plays it across the slot to Pedersen for a one-timer from the other side? So if, they cheat to cover the pass, then Miller has a shooting opportunity. We've seen him score from that opportunity quite a lot of times this year. If they cheat towards the shot because they're worried about Miller scoring, then he has an option either to, fire it through the seam to Pedersen on the right wing, or potentially find Horvat for the one-time look there as well. There's also the play where they go from Miller to the side of the net to either Kuzmenko or Besser, and then Bat in the slot, and that's created some offense for them too. So you're right, in terms of the way they can hurt you on the power play, it does feel like they're really evolving into a man advantage that isn't just the one play. Like, for example, we'll see the Capitals come in tonight. Alex Ovechkin's getting his shot for the top of the left circle, but he's such an elite player that he's probably going to score anyway, even when you're trying to defend it. The Canucks, they can hurt a variety of different ways. And if Hughes can really develop his shot to be a legitimate scoring threat from the point, then that's going to make it just much more difficult to defend against. And, one thing that could be encouraging in that regard is the number of goals that Horvat has scored on directs this year, because if Quinn Hughes can find an effective way to get the puck to the net from the top of the point, then Horvat's a guy there that can tip it. Besser's capable of deflections. Kuzmenko's scored a lot of tip goals this year too. And this is a power play that obviously right now they're really clicking, and at times they've been a bit streaky where they're in and out. But it kind of does feel like a real evolution to see that this could be a power play that, isn't just a good power play or an above average power play, but it's one of the elite power plays in the NHL.
Yeah, at times that certainly looks like it for sure. Batch, one of the coolest things I have to imagine about your job is getting an opportunity to call big goals from players that you probably grew up loving, or before your time in the NHL calling games. I'm sure Ovechkin is one of those guys. What's it like for you to call an Ovechkin goal call in the NHL? I'm sure that's a pretty surreal feeling. If I told you that maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And, whether it's Ovechkin or Crosby or even Daniel and Henrik, when they were still playing for this team, I came in their last year, so got a chance to call plenty of their goals, including that overtime winner against the Coyotes. That's kind of what I was imagining when I was growing up, wanting to get into this line of work is, talking about being able to call an Alex Ovechkin goal, or playing the NHL video game and calling an Alex Ovechkin goal, doing play-by-play while playing it. The fact that I get to do it now is pretty cool. Not something I take for granted. And, when some of these veteran players come through Vancouver, whether it's Ovechkin, whether it's Crosby, and you sort of realize that these guys are nearing the end of their careers, and the next few years, maybe last chance I have to call goals of guys who I kind of grew up watching. It's something that, you treasure even more, and it'll be cool to see Ovechkin come in tonight. And I understand that he, I believe, can tie Wayne Gretzky for the most road goals in NHL history if he scores tonight. And the way he plays against Bruce Boudreau, he's probably going to get one. So that'll be a cool moment to score in this game tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna imagine he beats the record tonight. The way that things go against Boudreaux with Ovechkin. Batch, we got one comment here. They say next time close the window. You don't need that puffy jacket for the next time you join the show.
The window's closed, but it's still pretty chilly in here. I'm at the Sportsnet offices downtown, so I don't know if they don't have the heat on here or whatever, but it's cold, so I'm keeping warm.
I'll tell you what, that was the opposite when you and I were in the studio.
Oh
down
my
at
gosh, that was the
650.
sauna.
We were sweating in there all the time in the studio. So glad you got it cool over there. Batch, we're also told to watch out for you in the corners in a beer league. Apparently, you like to throw it around in the corners, it says here.
Well, you got to stand up for yourself, right? You can't be like Austin Matthews, where you have to have your teammates fight your battles for you. You've got to fight your battles for yourself. So I'll throw an elbow if I have to.
Love it. Enforcer Batch joining us here. Appreciate it, Batch. Have a good call tonight, man. Thanks for taking the time
Yeah.
today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Anytime.